Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you and welcome to this session at the World Economic Forum here in Tianjin. My name's Andrew Stevens. I am the moderator of this session this morning, and it's gratifying to see that at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning we can still pull in a good-sized crowd. We appreciate that. Thanks very much for coming this morning. Our session is looking, as you well know, at frontier markets and whether these frontier markets are really the emerging markets of 20 years ago, and if they are, is the investment criteria, the risk criteria still the same sort of profile as it was. And we're going to be developing various threads on frontier markets over the next hour or so. I would of course encourage you to raise your voice if you have questions. We have a microphone here wandering through the table, so please make sure you, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll get to you as soon as I can. And I've also been asked just to double-check that people's mobile phones are switched off for the session. So frontier markets, really the first question we need to resolve today with the panel is what actually is a frontier market. I mean, it has been around for a while. To many people it's probably self-explanatory, frontier market. Other descriptions are a pre-emerging market, a market that doesn't have the size or perhaps the sophistication of an emerging market, but obviously has potential for growth. It may be an emerging middle class, it may be a resource-rich economy, it may be a so-called satellite economy, a country that borders a bigger economy, something, for example, like Namibia next to South Africa, or perhaps Slovenia next to Austria or Italy. Now, we all know frontier markets from an equity investment point of view. No doubt you've heard of the Standard & Poor's Frontier Market Index. It's been around for several years. And if you look at people investing as stock investors in these markets, it's been quite a healthy performance. I mean, if you look at the S&P Frontier Index market, I think the annualized returns are something like 37% over the past 5 years. Now you compare that with an emerging market, the Morgan Stanley Capital Index Emerging Market Index over the same period, it's 25%. Obviously there are huge risks, but as you can see there are also huge returns. Now that's the equity investor. Our panel today are more about the real economy. These are people who are putting, to coin a phrase, boots on the ground in these economies. They are, in many cases, first movers. They've got stories to tell, to share with us about just how they invest, what they look for, what the criteria is, what the risks are. So let me introduce the panel to you now. And on my immediate left is Wang Jianzhou, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of probably the best-known brand, if not certainly one of the best-known brands here in China. I'm talking about China Mobile. He has currently over 400 million subscribers and is adding them at a rate of 7 million every month. Astonishing figures. China Mobile has recently gone into Pakistan. We're going to be talking about that as a great case study of going into a market which obviously is unsettled and has a lot of issues to deal with. Why would a company like China Mobile put that amount of risk, or be prepared to accept that amount of risk going into a country like Pakistan as we know it at the moment? Next to Mr. Wang is Essa Al-Saleh. He's Chief Executive Officer with the Kuwaiti-based global logistics company Agility. And as the name suggests, they are certainly moving fast. Agility, just 10 years ago, was a small Kuwait single-country logistics company. 2008, 10 years later, they're in 100 countries. They have 32,000 employees and their turnover is over $6 billion a year and growing. Next to Essa is Mohammed Lutfi. He is with the Investment Board. He's with the Investment Coordinating Board of Indonesia. And Lutfi is going to bring to today's discussion a lot of relevance as far as the government is concerned. How do governments attract companies like the representatives sitting here today? How do they make sure that they get the investment? Because there's an awful lot of competition out there, obviously. So we'll be hearing from a government perspective as the head of an inward investment government body. And on Lutfi's left, we have Harish Manwani, who is the President of Asia, Africa, Central and Eastern Europe for Unilever. And I think Unilever, you think global brands that we've all grown up with, Rexona, Lux, Dove, it goes on and on. They're in 150 countries. I think there's only 30 left for Unilever now to get into. So certainly, in many ways, they wrote the book about investing and moving into the frontier market. So let's begin this discussion. And my first question is to Harish. And if you can, Harish, just describe to us, because Unilever has been doing this for so long, what do you define as a frontier market?
Thank you, Andrew. Well, I must say that certainly within the organization, we've never used the term frontier markets. So that's the first. And I think the important thing, the important distinction that you've got to make is that there is a developed set of markets and there is a developing and emerging set of markets. And to my mind, it is important to understand that whether we call them frontier markets or emerging markets or whatever, these are essentially subsets of markets that have the same characteristics of low market development and high growth potential. And that's the way we would look at these markets. And let me just describe to you, first of all, why, as Unilever, we are really excited about developing in emerging markets, and where do kind of frontier markets, if we have to squeeze a definition out, where do they fit in? I mean, first of all, developing and emerging markets are no longer what I call the other side, or the flip side of the developed markets. By 2010, 50% of consumer spending in PPP terms is going to come from the developing and emerging markets. Asia alone will overtake the United States in terms of consumer spending in PPP terms. So we are talking about a tectonic shift here, a big shift in the economic center of gravity. And you have a large number of these markets which are actually contributing to the developing and emerging market growth. 75% of the growth of GDP growth is going to come from these markets. Now, if you look at what is often called the BRIC markets, the Brazils, the Russias, the Indias, the Chinas, they of course are going to account for a large chunk of this growth. But equally, there are a huge number of markets which are, I guess, frontier markets in some ways, which are also growing. I mean, if you look at markets like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, parts of Latin America from Costa Rica to Uruguay so there are a large number of markets that are, in fact, all exhibiting similar profiles as some of the BRIC countries. So for me, the frontier market definition, if I have to use one, is that they are indeed the next generation markets, which are which are going to emerge pretty much as what some of the bigger markets today are. Now, obviously, there are some frontier markets in that respect which have smaller populations and some which have bigger populations. And to my mind, therefore, size is one aspect of it, but fundamentally, the opportunity of frontier markets is one of building markets and market development rather than fighting for market share. The second thing I want to just differentiate, it's also the eye of the beholder, this definition. If you are not in China, for example, and you're a company that wants to be global, China is a frontier market for you. Okay? Equally, if you're not in Pakistan, as I heard one of my colleagues say they are entering Pakistan. Pakistan is a frontier market. So from a company point of view, a market in which you don't operate, to my mind, is a frontier market.
Does that include developed markets as well?
Yes, it could develop. I mean, theoretically, any market that is white space for you is a frontier market. But like I said, that's semantics. My definition in terms of differentiating is these are fundamentally markets where there is great scope for market development, where you are going to go to build markets rather than compete only for market share. That is the key criteria for me.
Lutfi, if I can ask you, Indonesia has been seen, I would call it an emerging market. And we're talking, as Harish points out, I mean, it's semantics in a way. But a lot of people would make a differentiation between an emerging market and a frontier market. Les, how would you, as the chairman of the Coordination Board for Investment in Indonesia, differentiate between a frontier and an emerging market?
Well, I'm going to put it as simple as this, Andrew, is that, this gimmick is just a term to where you're going to make boatload of money. It's as simple as that. If it takes like Ukraine, where you make 700% in the last 3 years, Indonesia made 280% in the last 4 years. So when I read about this Goldman Sachs brick things, the underlaying of the concept was perception. And if that's what it needs to take to make boatload of money, I would like my country to be in that train as well.
You'd be happy to be described anything.
I'd love to be there, in the emerging market, frontier market. But a couple of things very important, I think. The frontier market is a market that needs some activity of development with a growing capital markets. Something to understand as well that, sometimes these markets is not that patient following the developed markets. And one thing to remember also that the information technology right now, it's everywhere. You just cannot isolate yourself and cannot be exclusive yourself that it's happening only in other countries, not happening here. Indonesia, at that point, we are a country right now with one of the lowest electrifications, 17,000 Andrew, and then we only have 411 watts per capita. Compared to India is like 800 watts per capita. So right now, Indonesia is giving contracts, 30,000 megawatts, just like that. We're buying from anywhere else that can give a capacity for turbines. Right, our turbines right now, out of our 13 power plants, mega size power plants, 12 come from China. Why? Because GE, Westinghouse cannot give capacity. Once we have electrifications, this is like China in the making. This is one of the largest, more agile market that is going to be really, really something.
So you need that critical mass. You obviously need the energy production to boost you into the next level, if you like. Now, Essa Al-Saleh, you're in 100 countries around the world. You're a logistics company. What do you look for, if you like, when you're going into one of these markets? So, because you do specialize in developing, stroke frontier, stroke emerging markets, what do you look for?
Well, first of all, what we define as a frontier or emerging market is a market where our customers have requirements.
I just want to pick up there. So you're frontier or emerging. So to you, they're the same thing.
Yeah, we view them as the same thing.
Yeah.
In essence, it's semantics.
Yeah.
What drives it for us is our customers who want to go into a new market or new opportunities, or customers who are based in those emerging frontier markets who want to go out and find other opportunities for their products. So in that sense, we feel having the right infrastructure, global infrastructure to support them is absolutely necessary. Our strategy is based on developing that infrastructure and focused on those emerging markets where the risk profile is a little bit higher, the opportunity to make higher returns is higher. However, you need a little bit of patience, persistence to deal with the challenges that would exist in a frontier emerging market. Had there not been any challenges or hurdles, you'll find that they wouldn't be classified frontier or emerging markets.
Wang Jianzhou, because China Mobile, obviously when it goes into a new market, has to spend a lot of money, do you look for a slightly different, what would I say, not criteria, I guess, when you're looking at expanding? Because you are now in expansion mode. You have a plan, you're rolling out across emerging markets again, frontier markets. But because you have to spend a lot of money, a lot of capital in there, are you much more cautious perhaps than our colleagues up here?
Yes, I think in terms of definition of frontier markets, I think frontier markets is a very good term for investors today, especially when we feel the assets in telecommunication assets in emerging markets become very, very expensive. We try to find some new opportunity. So we think the frontier markets may be very good choice for us as a beginner for international expansion. And in terms of the definition, I think for knowledge, frontier means something between know and unknown. And for markets, I think the frontier markets means pre-emerging markets. And compared with emerging markets, it has more risks, it has more uncertainty, but also it has more opportunity.
Now, without giving too many secrets away, what sort of countries would you be looking at? Can you name names? What do you see as the most attractive for you at the moment?
I think the strategy of China Mobile's international expansion, we will not focus on developed markets. We don't pay attention to the market in Europe. We don't pay attention to the market in North America. We pay attention to emerging markets. And I think the first choice is the Asian area, like Pakistan and some other Asian countries. And we also pay attention to African countries. That's our priority now.
Africa and Asia. Okay.
Yeah.
Harish, if I could just ask you, as someone who's been in for a long time, representing a company who's been in for a long time, to China Mobile, who's just rolling out their strategy, what sort of lessons have you learned over 125 years, or what the corporate body has absorbed over the 125 years of investing in these markets, which you would are the golden rules, if you like, that you pass on?
Yeah, well, since you asked me the question, you've got to hear a word from the sponsors first. And the word
You've got 10 seconds from now.
The word from the sponsors is that, of course, nearly half our business turnover, 46% of our turnover actually comes from developing and emerging markets. We have a turnover of about $60 billion, and half of it is really coming from these markets. These are the markets that contribute to a large proportion of our growth. In some of these markets, ranging from India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, we've been around for anywhere between 80 and 100 years. So I guess the first lesson is stay the course. But I think I just want to make one point before I talk about some of the lessons that we've learned, which is that life is a bit different between what it was, say, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and now. And the big difference, I think, is that capital is no longer the competitive advantage. Just because you have money and you want to go and invest in a market, that's no longer the competitive advantage. And the competitive advantage, therefore, has to be built around capabilities that you have and how you're going to differentiate your products and services in the markets that you go into. The second, and I think that's a very important differentiation, is that in a connected and increasingly boundaryless world, the segmentation is not by countries, it is by socio-economic consumer clusters. So that is why I have great difficulty in understanding the definition of frontier markets. So for example, there is an opportunity amongst a socio-economic group which may be upper income for a certain kind of mobile telephones. And if that happens to be your business, then whether those consumers happen to be in part A of the world or part B of the world, it's an opportunity. And therefore, I think the big difference, again, is the segmentation is less by country and boundary and more by consumer clusters. Having said that, what are some of the lessons that we've learned? I think the first big lesson in operating in markets, developing and emerging markets, is that these are heterogeneous markets. This is not one market. These are many markets rolled into one. And I'm going to give you just numbers of the population of the developing and emerging world and how it's segmented by income, socio-economic strata. At the mass end or the bottom end of the pyramid, you have about 2.3 billion people. 2.3, that's a market, by the way, but it's a very different market. In the middle of this pyramid, you have another 2.3 billion people, which are anywhere between what I would call the aspiring class. and these are consumers. And at the top end of the market, and this is I'm talking only developing and emerging world. At the top end, you've got 500 million people who are, affluent and well off. And I think the first lesson is, if you want to be a big player in developing and emerging markets, you must have product portfolios and services that allow you to straddle this pyramid and give offerings at the middle end, the bottom end, and the top end. You can't be a big player by sort of just exporting an offering from one part of the country into another. That's the first learning. I think the second learning is that the model of exports, to my mind, is not sustainable. Ultimately, you have to build local talent, local capabilities, because these markets, if you're serious about them and you want to be big players, you really have to embed yourself in the communities in which you are going to operate. So I think that's the second learning that we have. The third is the importance of partnerships and alliances. And these are not necessarily alliances in terms of equity stake, but in terms of how you do business and conducting business in these parts. And again, our learning here is partnerships in terms of distribution, sometimes even strategic partnerships in terms of supply chain, strategic partnerships even in equity terms are important entry points in developing and emerging markets. Be in it for the long haul. You have to have patience in markets, in developing and emerging markets. I mean, the fact that we've been 100 years in some of these markets is because when you go in there, you make a commitment. You make a commitment to say, I'm going to stay the course in terms of building capabilities, and I know longer term they're going to come good because you have a population base, you have underdeveloped markets, and these are high growth markets ultimately. And believe me, we get proven right each time. The only thing that gets us out of a country or reduces our commitment is that what is non-negotiable for us is a code of business principles. So we are not going to stick in a country if we believe that our code of business principle is being violated. But otherwise...
Has that happened? Have you actually pulled out because of your principles have been violated?
I think in many places we have kind of downscaled the business if we feel that our code is being compromised. But most importantly, we've slowed the pace of our progress because we believe that we are not going to do certain practices that may be necessary to accelerate growth. So I think in many ways we have allowed the pace to be determined by doing it the way we like doing it. And the last, I think, and very important, is this concept of, all multinationals talk about thinking global and acting local. But to my mind, if you really want to be successful in developing and emerging markets, you have to actually think local. You have to think local consumers, local customers, but act global. Your solutions can be global, but you have to start by thinking local. And this is a big nuance. I mean, and I'm not trying to spin words here. I really truly believe that you have to have a competitive advantage of scale and leverage, but that has to come by providing global solutions, and acting global, but in the marketplace, you've got to think local. And the last and very important bit is that in developing and emerging markets, you must be seen as a local company.
Okay, I get that. Getting inside the heads of the local, acting locally, being local, I'll put this question to Essa because we were talking about this before. You put a very high priority on your partners in local markets. How do you decide, what's your criteria for bringing someone on and getting inside that market?
Before I say that, I do want to say, I couldn't have said it better. As a company that's went from one country with 300 employees to a company now operating in 100 countries, 32,000 employees. It's a global network. We operate in Americas, Europe, and all other continents, but our focus is on those emerging markets. And every time we go into those markets, we apply the same principles that my colleague has mentioned. But we've done that, and we've gotten to that conclusion based on experiences and doing it, at times and making mistakes and learning from that. But at every time, you need local talent, you need a deep understanding of that local market, being flexible around partnerships and alliances. And to answer your question, what do we look for? We look for somebody who has some understanding of the market. In many cases, our partners are our customers who are looking for solutions that require, whether in country or beyond those countries. Those are the kind of things that we seek. In some cases, partnerships and alliances don't work. We like to enter those markets on our own.
Do you like to have control? I mean, is it important for you to have the controlling interest in the partnership?
It does. I mean, from a logistics perspective, where you need to control the quality, the service, the solution, you do need to be in control of that. But we're flexible in the sense of including partners, participating in equity, but in general.
But just sort of practical, on the ground due diligence, how do you find the right fit? Just very quickly.
In terms of partners?
In terms of partners.
Chemistry. We go in, we meet, we talk to many partners. We end up finding
a lot of it's gut.
Cultural. Is there a cultural alignment? And it's got to be win-win. If it's not win-win, if we try to impose our requirements and the partner doesn't feel that they're having a winning solution or winning partnership, it's not going to be successful. So it's got to be win-win.
All right. I don't want to leave no time for questions. So just before I open up the floor, a couple of things I want to ask, and one is to you, Wang Jianzhou. You have rolled out in Pakistan, and this brings me to the question of risks in these sort of markets. Obviously, Pakistan, as we know, is considered a high-risk market at the moment, particularly at the moment, given the political situation, the security situation. I mean, you can go on and on. What was your experience in Pakistan?
Okay, I like to share our experiences with you in Pakistan. 2 years ago, we acquired a company in Pakistan, Paktel, and now we changed the name into CM Park. And we pay about $400 million for acquisition. And last year we invested about $400 million for networks rolling out. And this year we pay another $800 million for a network rolling out. So when we got to the company, there were only 800 base stations all over Pakistan, and now it become about 4,000 base stations. We use the China Mobile specification for the rolling out of the network. And after we launched our international brand name Zong, Z-O-N-G, and we got more new subscribers. CM Park now still the smallest mobile operator in Pakistan for subscriber base, but for net addition, now we become number 1. And for example, in August we got more than 300,000 new subscribers.
But what about the downside? I mean, how have you managed that? Obviously there would be downside in an economy like that. Downside. Down, as in the risks.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
We have a lot of risks. We have a lot of troubles there. The very poor infrastructure. There are big shortage of power supply. Even the big cities like Islamabad, like Karachi, every day we meet with the shortage of power supply. We need to use our generator, and it makes the cost very high. And second, it's very difficult to find the place for the base station rolling out. And for telecommunication business, we say it's a low MOU, low ARPU, but high cost and high taxes. For example, the usage per month per user in China Mobile, it is about 500 minutes. But in our Pakistani company, only 150 minutes. The ARPU for us is $12 per month, but in our Pakistani company, only $3 per month. But the costs are very high.
Is there one thing you've learned from your investment and your operations in Pakistan? What would it be? What would you have done differently? What are the sort of the lessons that going into a place like Pakistan has taught you?
Yes. I think when we talk about frontier market, usually we from the viewpoints of financial investors. But I think if you only be a financial investor, it will be very difficult to make money at the beginning in frontier market. But China Mobile, we're not a financial company. We are not a private equity. We are a telecommunication operating company. So we not only do the investments, we will operate the company. We will use our advantages in China. We will use our experiences in China. We think the situation now in frontier market like Pakistan are very similar to those several years ago in China. So we can use our experience there. That's our experience.
Just very quickly on that point, do you find, and I'll ask this first of all, Harish, is there almost like a cookie cutter approach to this? Do you operate on the same strategy no matter what country? I mean, obviously with some variations, but generally?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not cookie cutter because, like I said, you have to understand local consumers, local the environment. But there are best practices, and as a global company, if you don't leverage best practice within the organization, then what is your competitive advantage when you go into these markets? So certainly there are a set of codified best practices, but those then you apply and adapt depending on the situation in those markets.
Lufti, if I can turn to you now and ask from a government perspective, what should a government do in terms of encouraging companies to go to them? Because our speakers haven't really mentioned the government angle here, and I'm not quite sure whether it's because they don't focus so much on the government relations, or whether we just haven't got around to talking about it. But what would you offer?
Okay. I'm going to give you a couple stories what happened in Indonesia, and companies like Unilever, China Mobile, and Agile, it's my customer. I treat them like my customer. Jardine Matheson bought a large Indonesian company in 2000. It was probably as close as a frontier market. Indonesia in the year 2000 was as close as a frontier market that can be today. In 7 years, Jardine Matheson out of Astra made 800%, 8 folds of its enterprise value in year 2000. Okay, this is just enterprise. If you look at the equity return, probably closer to like 60 times, closer to 60 times. And then stories like Tata. Tata bought a coal asset in Indonesia in 2006. In 2 years, they make 400% from 3.5 billion enterprise value to $12 billion. So what do we do as a government to attract? And we want them. We want this company to make boatload of money, Andrew. We want them. So what we do? First thing is that we make sure that there is a good planning on the government side on how we're going to develop our best performance sectors. In the Indonesian case, energy. I think because in the past we sell our raw material. There's a commitment now. We want to sell at least half-finished goods, not raw material anymore. And I believe in the past, energy follow industry. In the future, industry will follow energy. So they will come back to Indonesia. We would like to be good in agriculture because probably only 2 countries in the world that can perform a large agriculture base for food grade and non-food grade, only probably Indonesia and Myanmar. And if you can assess your risk in Myanmar, please go ahead because probably you can find some return there too. And the third part, we have to introduce the right dose of national interest in these globalizations. Make sure that the foreign companies that comes to the country well treated, well received, but also give a multiplier effect for the country itself.
Example?
Well, we had problems. If you know Freeport-McMoRan, it's a big copper and gold company. Every time we have some issue with international issues, with nationalistic issues, it come up. This nationalism is not unique to Indonesia. It's not unique to Indonesia. Remember when CNOC was going to buy Unocal in the United States? The Congress and the Senate of the United States vetoed it. When Dubai World was going to acquire TNO, the Congress and Senate of the United States vetoed that as well. So it's not unique. But at the same time, we have to introduce the right amount of national interest into the system. So if we can package this together, I would assure a company like Unilever, like Agile and China Mobile, in this case a lot of companies, not make just money, but a boatload of money.
Just on a very practical note, if Harish Nanwani rang you up and said, we're looking at investing here, what's your first 3 steps? I mean, how do you get them in to you, Lufti?
What's that?
Sorry, if a Unilever rang you up and said, we want to come in big time, what are you immediately going to offer them?
Well, a couple of things what I'm doing right now. I knock on doors right now, literally, personally, and I would basically follow and assure them like a hand-carry-on assistance. It's not easy. You know, I found them the piece of land. I'll make sure I give every incentive that is available in the country. I'll make sure the risk of doing it, materializing that investment, is been reduced by so much. I escort them to anywhere it needs to be in order to justify the investment. And are we doing a success on this? We're doing tremendously. You know, we're going to have 2 major car company investing in the country. This is an ego thing because we have to have Indonesian car, those kind of things. But it's not easy, but we're doing it, and we understand the competitions of attracting this simple multiplier effect of industry is very important. Okay,
I'll put this one to you. How closely should a company going into a frontier market become involved with government? Given the high degree of political uncertainty in so many countries, how closely do you want to be associated, should you be associated with the ruling party?
Well, I mean, we don't want to be political, but you do have to interact with the government, and we do to facilitate our entry, remove some of the barriers, or go through the bureaucracy that you do need to go through in those markets. So there is clearly an aspect of competencies that companies like ourselves need to have to deal with in dealing with governments in a partnership way.
But you try to keep arm's length as well?
I mean, to the extent that we keep focused on our core business, our commercial activities, I mean, is very important. I think to the extent that when we enter an emerging market or frontier market, the partnership that we form is not with the government, but with the community.
Harish, any comment?
I think it is important that you are involved in terms of industry associations, because ultimately you have to be part of an industry that goes into a country. And I think we certainly believe we must be actively involved. I don't think you have to be associated with party A, political party A or B, because that is not what business is about.
Okay, I'd like at this stage to open it up to the floor. So we've got plenty of questions. This gentleman here. If you could just state your name clearly, sir.
Ata Mutambara from Zimbabwe. I think what needs to be emphasized, and I think the panelists have already said some of it, is that doing business in frontier markets cannot be business as usual. You need completely different business models than those being used in developed markets. In particular, you need volume-driven strategies, technology-driven strategies. You need local wisdom, local insights, local managers, and also local shareholding, local equity, and also a stakeholder approach. You can't succeed in a frontiers market unless you engage the NGO community, the governments, other partners, for you to be successful at the bottom of that pyramid. You need cultural intelligence. So I think for us to learn effectively about succeeding in frontier markets, give us some examples of failure. What are some of the examples of people who have attempted to go to frontier markets and failed because they did the business as usual approach? Can we get some examples of failure?
Okay, it's a good question. Harish, we'll start at your end.
Well, I'm not going to give you examples of failure in terms of not succeeding in a country, but I will give you examples of where success in a particular category or a segment within a country has not worked. And you hit the nail on the head. Where we have tried to transplant concepts and ideas without adaptation into the market, inevitably it has not worked. Because there is a difference between managing global brands and making sure that global brands are relevant to local consumers. One mistake that companies sometimes make is to actually treat consumers as global consumers. There is no such thing as a global consumer. So in many times what has happened to us is that where we have actually followed the principle of understanding local insights and affordability, and I'll give you one example from India. In the 70s, we used to say we had an 80% market share in detergents. Okay? So we were sitting very pretty. Actually, the answer was no. We were defining the market in terms of what we call premium detergents. And then we suddenly saw there is a huge market below us, and our share is not 80%. Our share is actually 20%. And exactly what you said, to find then the business model to be able to provide solutions in that market at price points which were 1/4 of what we were doing and still make money out of it, then made sure that we went from 20% to a 40% market share. And I think that, to my mind, was an example again of basically understanding what the market is, reverse engineering, and catering to price points that are relevant in that market.
Okay, Wayne.
Naturally, the foreign investors pay much attention to the return of investment. But I think it is not enough. As a foreign investor, we should pay much attention to some other things. For example, the environment protection and some other things. And so in domestic market, we not only are operator, but also are corporate citizen. In foreign market, we will play the same role. We will be also a local corporate citizen. So in Pakistan, when we expand our network, we also set up our plan for take part in the social responsibility. That's our plan.
Comments from either of you two?
I mean,
just have you had a failure?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a good question.
I know it's a very good question. I mean, we've had some learnings. I wouldn't say failures because we're persistent and we're invested for the long term. And that's one of our realization. To be successful, your time horizon can't be a year or two to realize a return. It's minimum 3 to 7 years where you start generating a boatload of money. But that's the kind of time horizon. But we have had some learnings. We entered markets where in the early stages we imposed our solutions with partners, or it wasn't win-win. We entered, we didn't build the right stakeholder, engage the right stakeholders to enter those markets. And we've had to correct that. And that's part of our learning. That's part of what I think I heard here, saying those principles applied. In entering emerging markets, you do have to...
Lucy, did you have a comment? I'm going to have to ask the panelists to keep their answers fairly short now, because I've got a lot of questions here. We're running out of time.
Just answering your first questions and how I refer to my friends from Zimbabwe, is that, what I told my companies, my big companies, when they try to come to Indonesia, is that, this is a class I took in college, the pricing theory, Black-Scholes. He says that, if the economy is efficient, it looks like a round ball, perfect shapes. It's certainly, countries like Indonesia, like Zimbabwe, it's a nudge. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. Once you do it, you can do it. Although from my side, I try to reduce that nudge, that cultural shocks, for these people to make that boatload of money.
Very quickly, in your experience, you don't have to name names, but who came into Indonesia, tried and failed, and why?
Well,
give me the industry.
I'm not going to give names, but one of the few things is that sometimes they'd like to take the culture that they have in their country, some smaller ones, some big ones. Got there, they think that everything should work like as if they were in their own country. And it's just not like that. Such as, just a matter of language. We have this Javanese culture, when they said everything is okay and it will be done tomorrow. But the terms tomorrow in Javanese language can be the next day, 2 months, 3 years, or maybe in the next lifetime. So it's just something that, you have to understand the local language as well.
I don't know whether that's necessarily restricted to just Javanese. Sir, just here with the Jacqueline.
From the Oriental Morning Post, can you share your experience of pricing strategy, team construction, mergers and acquisitions in frontier markets? Thank you.
Pricing strategy
Team construction and M&A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who would like to take that one?
I mean,
Yes, sir.
it depends on the market. Our pricing strategy is usually to build a base business, therefore you price it competitively as we enter new markets, to build the credibility, experience, and then as you evolve and learn and people appreciate this kind of services that we apply, you're able to charge a higher rate, earn a higher premium. I think that was the part. Was there another part of the question?
Was it also about team building? Team building.
Team building.
Well?
It's got to be a local team. I mean, from our perspective, we like to hire from the country, go through our programs of training and development and learning our culture, but they got to have the local understanding, and the culture is very important for us.
Wang Jian Zhou, on that point, how did you deal with that in Pakistan and team building?
The team building is the most important thing, I think, although we have many difficulties, and the key issue is to have a very good team. And at the very beginning, we send more management team from China Mobile, and now we use most of our managers from local. We now have our Pakistani COO, and all of the manager level people are local now.
I remember interviewing an Indian industrialist who had just taken over a German company, and his plan was he got his top managers in a hotel for a weekend from both India and Germany and let them basically get it on and nut it out, and they came out at the other end and it was fine. I was just wondering, Harish, what do you propose to bed down an acquisition and get the team working in the right direction?
Yeah, I think the points really have been made. It is absolutely critical that the hardware of any acquisition is simpler. You can do that. You know, how do you get the cost synergies and how do you do that? But the cultural synergy is the one on which you have to work. And I agree that you have to really make that effort and not ignore it, because ultimately, operationally, you can't run companies till you have this kind of harmony in terms of being culturally in tune.
There must be a sort of a danger of hubris or even arrogance, though, that someone like a Unilever comes in and said, "We have been doing this for 125 years. We know how to do it. You will do it our way." How do you avoid that?
You avoid it by not saying that. You avoid it because you know that it doesn't work that way. But of course, at the end of the day, you have to recognize that there are best practices that you can bring. But I mean, if you want me to be specific, we've done lots of acquisitions, local acquisitions and global acquisitions, and ultimately, in each and every case, forming an acquisition team whose primary job is to do this cultural integration, and having leadership on that team from both sides is mission critical.
Okay. The lady here. Down here, please. No, excuse me? Down here? Down here. Down at the front. Thank you.
Thanks. From Economic Observer, my question is to all the speakers except Wang Jianzhou. Some say Chinese economy is now facing the hardest time in 3 decades. So I want to know, do you think Chinese market is still attractive, and do you have big plans in Chinese market in next few years? Thank you.
Sorry, was that to Mr. Wang?
Without
Except Mr. Wang.
Oh, okay.
Oh, without, sorry.
Except the two. Okay, well, I think the Chinese market is very attractive indeed and continues to be. You know, when I always get a little amused when people talk about slowdowns and they say, you know what, the developing and emerging market is going to slow down. China is going to slow down from 11.5% to 9.5%, 10%. I'll take that. I think I'll take that, 10%. So I certainly think that, certainly in our kind of business, which is more about fast-moving consumer goods, consumer demand is very robust. There is a lot more to go for, and quite frankly, we are very excited and enthused by it.
Okay.
Clearly, China is a very strategic market. We already operate in China. We've made some acquisitions in China and continue to develop. And it has slowed down, but still growing at a rapid pace. But for us, it's a very strategic and important market for us.
Lufti?
Well, I'm probably looking at a different way. Put it this way. Indonesian investment in China today worth about $16 billion. China's investment in the country worth about $2 billion. I just came from Guangzhou. I had, I don't know, 400 participants, and every single one of them asking for very technical details of how to invest in the country. So from my point of view, they are still the it in the next future.
I've just noticed there's a few questions coming in from the media, which is great, but you may be able to talk to the gentleman particularly afterwards. I'd just like to get some questions from non-media as well. So, other questions? You, sir, standing up, please.
Sorry. Sorry, maybe I just now I didn't get you. I'm from Panelist Mag. I have two questions for Mr. Nawani. One is, as a household product manufacturer, what do the macroeconomy environment impact on Unilever? And the second is, as we know, for decades, Unilever has been shadowed by P&G. Do you have any card in sleeve to tackle this? Thank you very much.
I didn't quite get the first question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Wait.
Yeah. Okay. As a household product manufacturer, would the China macroeconomy, the change of macroeconomy environment impact on Unilever? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I think same answer that I gave to the previous person who asked the question. Our kind of goods are really dependent on domestic demand, and quite frankly, whether the GDP growth is 11 or 9 or 9.5%, these are very fast-growing markets. The big difference between generally developing and emerging markets of the past and now is that they are being fueled more and more now by domestic demand. Whether you take China, India, Brazil, Russia,
does that include the frontier,
yes,
pre-emerging markets as well? Do you have that?
I think clearly less so, because at the end of the day, the BRIC markets, for example, have a very large population base and therefore a large home market. And therefore, in that context, we remain very confident about demand for our kind of categories. That's number one. Secondly, you made a comment about our competitors. We love our competitors. If our competitors were not there, we would get slow and slothful. So we're very happy we've got our competitors.
Write that one on the wall. Madam, yes, please.
I work for China Finance. My question for every panelist. Would you describe a whole picture about your company in the next 10 or 20, 30 years? And what are major challenges and risks in the recent?
That's obviously a very big question, so I'll have to ask you for a very short answer. Maybe we'll start with you, Harish, and come down.
Maybe we should start from there.
Okay. Mr. Wang.
Okay. We are very confident about the future of our company, and of course we will continue our mobile business in the coming years. And now we are facing some new challenges. For example, the impact from the financial crisis internationally, and for example, the more competitive market conditions. But I think the demands of mobile phones still very, very huge in China. We will continue to acquire new subscribers. We will continue to increase the voice usage of existing customers, and we will develop more application, business application and entertainment application to our customers.
Thank you.
We're very bullish on the future. I mean, logistics will continue to be in demand, whether in good times or bad times. We have a very clearly articulated strategy based on 5 principles to which we're focused on. One of them is continue to expand and build our network in what we call our white spaces, and some of them exist in some key emerging markets or frontier markets. But it's very much focused on growing that network and continue to integrate it in a common platform.
Well, from my side is how Indonesia going to be in the next 20, 30 years, put it this way. You know, we came out of reform. We did our homework. We did everything that's needed to be done in order to progress. So I believe that with all the democracy, with all the clumsiness, I think we have hard learned, and we will excel in the future.
I think we are confident because we have a geographical spread where half our business is in the developing world, which is very fast growing, and half our business is in the developed world. And I think having this combination of developed and developing world, we believe gives us leverage, and therefore we remain confident. The second is that the opportunity in the developing and emerging world is huge because per capita consumption is still very, very low. And the example I always give, if you take shampoos, detergents, the consumption levels even in big and important developing markets like India, Indonesia, China is a minuscule of what it is in the developed markets. So lot of headroom to go for.
We're just running out of time. I'd like to ask a question to all our panelists, and this is obviously a topic in frontier markets in many, many markets around the world, and that is the issue of corruption. Obviously, as more economies become more advanced, the levels of corruption change and usually diminish. But in these new frontier markets, a lot of these countries, you would find, I suspect, quite high levels of corruption. How do you deal with that? How big a risk is it for you doing business, and how much do you actually have to comply with this sort of corruption? Maybe I'll start at this end with Wang Jiajun.
Okay. Very simple answer. The discipline first, return second.
So discipline first. So that means zero tolerance?
We should keep our discipline first for our operation activities.
Yes, sir?
We have a set of principles, code of ethics, that we apply universally.
Have you walked away from deals, from countries, because
we have not walked away from countries, but we have walked away from management teams that don't apply to our code of ethics. Right. And we apply that discipline rigorously across our network.
Okay. Lufti, I mean,
I'm going to ask him first.
Well, we are absolutely clear. I mentioned this. We have a code of business principles. This is written down. It is non-negotiable, irrespective of whether you are in country A, B, or Z.
Is it diminishing, though? I mean, is the levels coming down, do you think? Is it
a level of what?
A level of sort of broad corruption, if you like.
I am not in a position to comment about the overall level of corruption. All I can say is that as a company, we have managed to operate in a country using our own code of business principles. Sometimes it may have slowed down the process of our progress or our growth, but inevitably, I think once you begin to operate with a certain degree of principles, governments and indeed people that you deal with begin to understand that. And I think the question really is, the answer really is that you can operate in countries and still uphold your values.
All right. Okay.
I'm going to answer that. And well, coming from a country that was ranked number 4 of the worst corruption in the world, and today Indonesia fight corruptions, I believe no other countries in the world doing it. Ministers, governors, mayor, ex-ministers are right now being prosecuted. Why? Because I think, I sound cliche, but democracy warrants us to be a very efficient, to create an efficient economy. In order to create an efficient economy, we need to have a good and transparent government. And we now jumped 61 level from what we had a couple years ago. Why? Because we want an efficient economy. It's a commitment.
All right. On that note, we'll have to leave it. I'd like to say thank you to our panelists. Harish Manwani with Unilever.
Thank you.
Muhammad Lufti with the Indonesian Investment Board. Essa Al-Saleh with Agility, and Wang Jiajun with China Mobile. And thank you all, gentlemen, for your time, and thank you for coming today.